this. And then also I want to make Matthew co-host, and then I'll tell you who Matthew is. Most of you know him. Before I go introduce myself. Yeah, admin. Okay, good. So I think I'm set. Let's take a deep breath. Take a deep breath, arrive, settle in. I was talking to our speaker, Mark, right before this a little bit, so my mind is still there. But this is our connection hour, our monthly meeting where we have been meeting for over a year and a half now, maybe close to 2 years now, from the beginning of pandemic, maybe even more actually, 2.5 years, including those other sessions that were not called connection hour. And so we created this community to hold space for anybody who'd like to join and voice their experiences, right? And then we can also bring some knowledge, some wisdom, some compassion to sort of nurture these good qualities, human qualities within ourselves, within others, and then create a space where everybody can contribute, can share, can feel comfortable, can feel safe. That's the intention. And so we've been working on that and looking at sort of also improving the experience for everybody. We've had for this session, we had many people register. I think over 60 people register. So they may still show up, so we can hang in there, and we'll welcome them. Whoever comes later, they're welcomed. And then today I want to also announce that I'd like to introduce Matthew Law. Most of you know him from other sessions. He's been with us also for many of these, I think for the most part of these connection hours. And he's a colleague of mine. He's the Global Director of Employee Excellence. Let me also, Matthew, make you add the pin, bring you in. Yeah, okay, that's better, right? So you know who I'm talking about. He's the Global Director of Employee Excellence at Maersk. He has recently joined us to sort of collaborate with Perfectly Here to take our programs global, which I've created this 3-dimensional life intelligence, which really incorporates a sort of a comprehensive training for humanity, pieces of training that I believe we don't necessarily get, are missing from so much knowledge and education that's out there. And so we want to incorporate all of them within under one auspices, one sort of a umbrella called 3-dimensional life intelligence. And so Matthew has been working with me behind the scene to improve, develop, create alliances. He's also doing a master's degree with mindfulness through Lesley University in Cambridge. And so as part of his community service, he's also, just being with us, collaborating, partnering with us in every direction. And we're trying to link our educational system to the SDG of the United Nations 17 goals for sustainability, for humanity, for all kinds of needs around the world. So as much as we are capable, and we are expanding our sort of educational parameters, topics, incorporating other leaders, other teachers, other entities from other industries to collaborate with us. So there's a lot of work we're doing behind the scene. And of course, the invitation is always open for anybody to join us. And so Matthew has a very good mind about community and qualities of a community that we could develop, continue to develop. And our speaker, Mark Anthony Hernandez Motaghy, who I'm so proud to say is my nephew. I love you. So if I called him sweetheart or anything like that, you know why. So his topic is on the same as building, developing communities, and the quality of communities, that every single person matters, and their involvement, their role, their position, their intention to sort of make communities alive, not just a banner or a motto, or something I have sort of noticed, this word sexy or attractive, right? The word sexy or attractive is attached to every experience, at least here in America, or at least here in California or Southern California, the Western countries, sort of looking at everything that needs to be, good looking. I was talking with Mark about the word care. That's what he was talking about. Like we made the word care, it has to become attractive, and it loses life. It loses its intention. So we want to keep ourselves alive individually and as a collective. And without any further ado, I'm going to have Matthew also say a few words. He's going to be co-hosting this today, co-moderating, and then we will take it from there.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very humbling introduction. No, I think that I do think that I've probably been to all of the connection hours, unless I accidentally missed one. And it's been amazing how they've grown over the time that we've been having them. And so what I'd like to do, and I'm gonna with this couple of months with Lesley University, is try and look at how we can even build upon what the strong foundations we already have. And I'm a big believer in belonging, and that human sense of belonging. And they say that there's three things that keep us coming back when you have a belonging. And I really believe that this connection hour is about people always coming back. And there's many people that I've seen also have come to almost all of the, if not all of the connection hours. But it's about, first of all, there's a comfort. We feel comfortable. It's a safe space. We can share and talk. Then there's always a connection. It's called connection hour. We always share our thoughts, and many times it's the same feelings. And it's been very important in the last few years that we have that connection. And then finally, there's a contribution aspect. So we've always been able to contribute. And many of us have also been the speakers at various times in the connection hours. And we encourage everybody who attends to also step up and spend some time talking as well. So everybody has a seat at the table and a voice at the table. And I think that's very important. So I'm very excited to be able to work with everybody and with Manijeh and the team to see what we can do in the next few months when it comes to connection hour. So thank you for the introduction, and great to see everybody. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. That was very good expansion of the qualities we want to develop. So what I'm thinking, perhaps putting people in some rooms so that they could talk about community. What does community mean to you? What communities do you belong to? Do you like what you're belonging to? Why do you like it? What makes it comfortable or meaningful? What makes it some place that you keep going back to? I think that's a good topic that we can have everybody, give a chance to everybody to talk about, and also gives a chance to people to build these friendships, right? These connections here. And if somebody feels uncomfortable talking or anything, don't feel obligated, because I know from teaching courses that not everybody is. And so you don't have to respond. You could just be an observer, listener. But it's always lovely to have your camera on when you're in these rooms together, so that you could see each other and see what shows up. So basically, let me see. I will. Okay, you are coming back. So if you would please type in the chat one or two words, qualities that you feel like a community got you to keep going back. You felt like you wanted to go back to a community that you have experienced before, or now with this community. Just put that in the chat. What would be some qualities for you? Let me see if people are coming back. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I put a question in the chat. If you could just type one or two words in the chat, what quality got you to go back to this community, either this community or any community you belong to, meetings, families, friendships, gatherings. So the word community doesn't have to be strangers, right? It could be close people. Let's see what people can come up with. Hopefully belonging, like-mindedness, kindness, safe space. Yeah. What else could be? Social community aspect, open-mindedness, being listened to. That's great. I hope you're feeling like you're being listened to right now. Yeah. So, okay, like-minded, safe, support, giving to others. Very good. Yeah. So it's a kind of being able to contribute and being supported. Yeah. Okay. So now put a couple of maybe one word or two about what was the quality where you just didn't want to go back to that community anymore. What deterred you? What kind of puts you off? You didn't want to go back. Judgment, yeah, yeah. Feeling guilt or shame, yeah. Rigidity, intolerance, yeah. Yeah. What about pretense? Anybody? I'm gonna put that in there for my negativity. Crosstalk in the group. Okay, crosstalk. I think Matthew has something to say about that. We were talking about this actually. Unsupported, outcast, polar or opposite views. Yeah. Yeah, so we want to be comfortable, right? Very good, excellent. So having said that, I think just thinking about also time management and all that, I'd like to just give a chance to anybody who would like to say a couple of words about what you heard in your in your breakout rooms, anything that feels like you'd like to share that, so you're not left with just saying a couple of words in the chat. Just raise your hand if you know how to, or unmute yourself, come in. It's always good to hear from people. You're thinking too much.
Hey, Manijeh, I'll share something.
Hi, love. Go ahead.
So I'm not going to share what I shared in the breakout room, but what I will share is that last July 29th, I got married. And at our last meet, at the last connection hour, I was actually on my pre-honeymoon in Costa Rica. I was on the beach.
Oh, wow. No wonder you didn't show up. Congratulations. Wow.
Just wanted to share that with everybody. So thank you, Manijeh.
That's fantastic news. Thank you. Yes, yes. Yeah, anybody else has the marriage, babies, anything to share? Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. So, all right. So we'll launch into speaking with Mark Hernandez Motaghy. He's a MIT designer and researcher, and he's an amazing guy. So low key, so low key. He does not want to exaggerate or show off or nothing, but there is so much to him. He's so wise and so kind and so full of life and full of perspective, and so I'm very happy and proud to have him here. He authored recently a book called Rehearsing Solidarity, and I put the link in the chat that you could get this book from Thick Press, thickpress.com. So I love how humble this book is printed. I love it. It goes really with the personality and the mission of your life, Mark. So what else can I say about you? Nothing. I want you to come on and yeah, come on, and I'm gonna add a pin to you. Yeah. But Mark, I'm gonna ask you, and then people will have a chance to please ask him a question. I'm gonna set it up in this way. I remember maybe 3 years ago, right, that you had applied to all these universities, and they wanted you. Everybody wanted you. MIT, Harvard. I don't know. These people wanted you. Not true. Yeah, you would say that. So you chose to go to MIT, and then pandemic hit, and then you decided you don't want to be on Zoom. You like to be in person, and you delayed it for a little bit, and then got back. Give us a little background about you had a degree in architecture, right?
Yeah.
And then you went to master's degree. Give us a little background on that.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
I think Honey's going to say something.
Love you.
Love you too. It's so funny.
Love you.
Love
oh my
you.
God, how much I miss you. You look great.
Oh, I miss you too. Thank you. Miss you too, honey. It's funny. Well, thank you, Manijeh, for giving me the space to be here. And shout out to my mom and my brother who are on the call as well, Darius, Laura, and my 2 aunts as well. It's just so funny. I mean, they're being shy and they're not turning on their cameras for some reason. But it's good to see you, honey.
Good to see you, Junam. I love you.
I also have a very short presentation that I can get into after this, or we could just talk. I'm down to do whatever. But yeah,
just give us a little background and then do what you want to do. Yeah, I'll leave it to you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I studied architecture in my undergrad, and I worked as an architect for maybe 4 years, and I realized that I was an artist and a writer, and I wasn't fit for making buildings. And so I chose this MIT program. It's a design program and an art program within like an urbanism context. So we're thinking about I guess, yeah, the structures and how things work in the city. And this book is special to me. It's my first like writing project, and I'm writing about a lot of what we talked about today. Really, I'm writing about like my experience of being in the pandemic with my community in Brooklyn. And then when I moved to Boston for MIT, I was speaking about that as well. So yeah, I don't know. I wear a lot of different hats. Yeah, I'm an artist, researcher, and I'm also an organizer, as you'll see from the talk. But does that give context? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe. I don't know what else I can say, but maybe I could just get into the slides. Do I have
Yeah, I
permission
can
to
give
share my
you,
screen?
let's see, give you permission, all participants. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, cool. Actually, I might need 1 minute to get this going. I'm having
Take your time. Yeah, maybe.
It's been a while since I've been on Zoom, so
That's okay.
copy
If you want to take a minute, I'll have Matthew talk about community. Matthew, talk about, what was it I said, you know, something to say about? Let's see.
First of all, I'm really happy about Eric, actually.
Putting him on the spot.
I knew Eric was getting married too, by the way. I remember from last time. So I think that that's a really amazing thing that he just shared. That's super cool.
Okay.
Well, here comes the slides now.
You can see it, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Did you have anything
And-
else to say, Matt? I don't want to cut you off.
No, it's okay. But I think you should start by telling us what you think the definition of community is.
Oh, that's a good question. So when I wrote this book, I learned that everyone has such a different idea of what community is. Some people really romanticize it as this thing that they're a part of. Some people don't even think they are a part of a community when they really are. And some people understand it like geographically within their like neighborhood. Some people understand it like in this room where we're all in different spaces, but we're still in a community. So one of the things that I did in the book was I stopped using the word community and I started using the word pods. And that comes from some other organizers, namely Mia Mingus. And she likes the word pods because it's very like concrete. You can qualify it, but you can also like quantify it. You can count who's in your group and you can just start to see what you want to do with your community. So that's my answer to not define it. I don't know if that's a good one, but Shiden says, turn me on, please. Shiden, I think you can say something if you want. Or maybe not. Okay, I'm gonna get into it. I mean, here's the book. It was designed by Omnivore, and it's funny, like whenever the editor or someone says that it's, you know, my book, I would just say like in a very cheesy way that it's our book. And I think, you know, I'm sort of reaffirmed when you look to the left side of just like all the voices that I'm in dialogue with, and these are neighbors and organizers that I've been working with. And so maybe to just like situate us spatially on where I'm talking about, the organization Crown Heights Mutual Aid, or CHMA, they're located in New York City, known as Lenapehoking, including the Canarsie Band, where Crown Heights is located and where I used to live. And then Mamas is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I'm currently based. and it's the land of the Mashpee Wampanoag and the Aquinnah Wampanoag and the Massachusetts people. And this is a scan of the edge, which I really like from the book, because you can really see the different dialogues that are happening within the publication. So if you see the white bands, those pages are interviews that I did with organizers. If you see the yellow bands, that's an event that I hosted with both of the groups, kind of talking about what we talked about today. You know, what is a community, and specifically what is a pod? Because Brooklyn and Massachusetts had such different ideas of what those things were, so we came together to discuss them. And then the baby blue, which you can barely see, are my personal reflections on what I was thinking, what I was going through. And then at the very end, the very dark blue, it's just an archive of all the documents that were passed around. And there's an amazing essay by Dr. Lauren Hudson, my neighbor, who writes about the solidarity economy and how communities fit within that. I won't go into that, but yeah, so I mean, this is 2020, I'm writing in March, when, you know, you would start to see flyers like this, people starting to make these networks and trying to find a way to meet people's needs in these communities. And I kind of want to read just 3 pages from the book. I think it'll give a bigger picture and ground us in what I'm talking about. But I might have to, maybe I'll just speak to you like this and be more informal. So I'm going to read from the introduction. It'll take like 10 minutes. There's 3 pages. So this publication emerges from my neighbors, friends, and comrades in Crown Heights Mutual Aid and Mutual Aid Medford and Somerville. The following conversations and reflections slowly accumulated throughout the COVID-19 conjuncture. What took form, something between a zine and a zine book, is a combination of many things: a resource, a toolkit, an archive of communities fighting back against state failures. What is easier for me to see now, reflecting on the past years of the pandemic, is that this project also parallels a private inquiry. Grieving the loss of a brother I myself saw support in the midst of a crisis, and I wondered what collective care beyond family kinship, one of the most basic social contracts for social reproduction, what that might look like. So at the onset of the pandemic, I was living in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and the neighborhood had been my home for the past 5 years. As with many other friends and neighbors, I was caught in a moment of, how am I supposed to do anything, but also how am I supposed to not do anything? So for better or worse, I now had more time on my hands since I had been laid off my job. And I had a number of concerns, from how I would get my basic needs met, such as food and housing, to how long the COVID-19 crisis would last. I felt lucky that I was able to fall into CHMA's network through my existing community in Crown Heights. I found the Slack and Facebook group in April of 2020 after searching online for mutual aid groups in Brooklyn. A few weeks later, my friend who owns a restaurant in the neighborhood notified me about food she had to deliver every week. This led to a partnership between the restaurant and CHMA. I fell into the governance working group, and I began to focus on food distribution. So food plays a significant role in this publication because of my work with CHMA. I mention this in order to not lose sight of the myriad of efforts undertaken by both groups. Mutual aid wasn't just securing groceries. Neighbors were there to cheer on rent strike banner drops. We were there in protest in response to the murder of George Floyd. We were barricading an apartment in solidarity when a neighbor had been forcefully evicted. We were organizing a political education working group discussing the works of Mariam Kaba. There was a whirlwind of mutual aid efforts that ebbed and flowed with the waves of COVID-19. And so the first iteration of this publication was the zine, Things We Learned from Organizing Pods. I'm going to skip a little bit. It contained a transcription of an event I organized and facilitated called a neighborhood pod sharing event, which I refer to as the pod share throughout the publication. The event was organized in the spring of 2021. I had continued to be moved by watching neighbors slowly become friends and meet each other's needs, by practicing a formation of solidarity and collective care. I saw the meaningful workings of mutual aid, yet I shared many questions about the group's future. So I organized public dialogue between both groups. At this moment, many mutual aid groups were downshifting from rapid response models to imagining long-term communities. We were seemingly on our way out of pandemic, but unquestionably still in a capitalist crisis. The virus was just a symptom of a sick society. So like many other organizers in their communities, I asked, how do these mutual aid groups that address the needs of their communities in 2020 continue, adapt, and experiment with new collective care formations? And so the idea for the pod share began when Matt and I were discussing how many other mutual aid groups shared our questions and anxieties. Shortly after we met with a mutual aid group, one of the communities had shut down their announcement, their hotline. And the hotline is basically like during the pandemic, they set up an amazing hotline where people could call in and you can ask for groceries and they would deliver it to you. And that's part of what I was doing. It was completely based on trust, which was inspiring. But I want to read just the last part of this. So the pod share, sorry. The workings of the mutual aid groups described in this publication continue a long history of solidarity work. What's perhaps unique about the mutual aid groups that were formed during the pandemic is that they work to cooperate at a mass scale across political ideologies, gender, class, and race. This could explain why it's challenging for these groups to find common ground after the crisis shock of the pandemic. Do we need to be tied politically to be sustainable? Or is it okay if efforts slow down, come to a halt, and maybe compost into something else in the future? What's at stake is different for every neighbor. It's also important to note that the majority of organizers in this publication were in a position where they could give rather than receive aid. And so the following conversations go into his inquiries and inner workings of CHMA and Mamas. The zine books tells a story of mutual aid groups that assembled for the COVID-19 crisis and what it meant to reassemble for the capitalist crisis. Although this work might not be considered nothing new, these ongoing practices of collective care can open new possibilities for what communities working together might do in this crisis and the next. And I just want to share a definition of what mutual aid means in this context. This is from Lauren Hudson, my neighbor and amazing geographer. We can understand mutual aid as both an ethos and a tactic, the latter of which, such as securing and distributing food, collective education, or providing financial resources, has transformative potential regardless of whether the collectives themselves are formed as rapid response or as extended political projects. At its core, mutual aid aims to change the relationships between its actors, and in so doing, change what participants consider possible, which I think is a beautiful way to put it. Before I go forward, are we ending at 1, Manijeh? Because when should I end?
Okay. Well, you're in Mexico, right? You're different time zones. So we have about, we have about, formally, we have about, let's say 15 more minutes to end the session. But usually we stay another half an hour, like after party thing. So, so you can go another maybe couple of minutes, and then we give chance for people to ask questions, and that will inspire more response from you.
That sounds good. Okay. I think I'll just end, maybe I'll just say a bit more about like these pods and what they were thinking. I won't go into the details because I think it really it goes into the weeds of like what they were doing, but I really like this diagram that my neighbor sketched. when we started, we were like a Slack group of 2,000 people. And so she was trying to think about how we can be smaller, more intimate groups. And I also really like this diagram because it really opens up the imagination that happened when the crisis hit. There were all these imaginaries of like hyperlocal communities and what they might be. And we didn't end up doing something like this, but we came close to it by the different things we were working with. So for example, like in Crown Heights, we made a bulk buying club where it's kind of like a CSA, and the CSA is a community supported agriculture group where people were putting their money together to buy their groceries, and food is it's something that everyone needs. And so it was a way for people to gather across different classes and race and age and such. I also want to talk a bit more about community. I was really inspired by our conversation today. And Mariam Kaba, who I really love, she's like a organizer, abolitionist. She puts forward the idea of a community with 1 million mutual aid groups, right? So what she's really saying is like, everything doesn't have to be everything. This group doesn't need to fill every need. This Zoom call doesn't need to fill every need that we're doing, but she's sort of imagining a world where there are multiple entry points where people can plug in. And by being very small and intimate, there's a possibility to be, there's a possibility to be more nimble and slow and rooted. And maybe the last thing I'll say, I took a really amazing workshop with Mia Mingus, who's a trainer for transformative justice and disability justice. And I took a workshop on pods, what they are. And she says that, pods are kind of like the scaffolding of the world we're trying to get to, or these little communities. And she says that because capitalism relies on the breaking of our relationships. And so she asks us to think like, how long does it really take to form trust? It takes a while. And so she described a pod just as a small form of mutual aid, and there can be many different kinds. There can be online pods, there could be food pods, there could be garden pods. And she says, where is the relationship? Where is the trust? And then let's build there, let's start there. The last thing, I just threw this in last minute because of what you said, Manijeh. This is the last thing I'll show, but this is a note from my editor, which I thought was super funny. My own editor was like, this book is kind of boring. And I was like, I thought that was so funny because I knew it wasn't a knock on the book, but it was just an understanding, like what you said, Manijeh. A lot of these things are not sexy, but I love that the editor said, like, it's both boring, but it's also riveting. It's life affirming. And so that's a lot. And I can just go into the weeds, but maybe we can just chat a little bit more and have a conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So this gives me an idea even for this community of connection or other communities that we are trying to build with our programs, right? Because our programs are going to be, have been having different sort of prongs to them. People who are interested in the planetary changes and climate change, and they're very interested in the oceans or interested in the weather or climate or other things, and people who are interested into human emotions or the way we have relationships. Or so with your research and your understanding that these pods, they don't have to be ginormous communities for an organization or for a community to be successful necessarily, right? Is that what you're getting at? Because it's very useful for all of us here because many of us here are heads of some communities, that we are trying to organize, and that's a useful feedback for us.
Yeah, totally. And I think the lesson we learned was like, we were trying to take this community we made and do everything with it. You know, we're doing food things, political or education, and maybe like some of the things you said. But when we put that much pressure on one space to fill all our needs, it would just, the weight would just collapse on it. And really, like by having these more small, intimate groups, they can also change as we change as well. You know, it's more nimble, and maybe it can be directed in different ways, and it can be more specific too. Like you can have one just for what was the thing you said? Like the
Planet sustainability, right?
That sounds cool. Yeah, I want to be part of that.
Yes, definitely. That's great. So let's open it up to other people and see who has any questions for Mark, any comments, any ideas to add. Yes, go
I'll
ahead.
go. First of all, thank you, Mark. That was so informative. And boy, did you make very good use of your COVID time. I think the question that always comes to me with community and outreach and the way you put it, collective care, is the how. How, like, I think there's a lot of times in my thought, I want to get involved or I want to be a part of something bigger than myself. But it's how do you, where do you go? Like I go online, like, is there any outreach? Is there anybody delivering food? Is there anybody? And I don't really find these resources to get involved on that bigger picture. Do you have any, like I saw at the beginning of your book, you had a flyer just posted to the door in New York about your Facebook chat. And I think, wow, is it really that easy? Like to get people or to do something? So my question is, how do we find those pods or these programs to get involved in, to do something good, bigger than ourselves?
That's a really good question. Well, when the pandemic first happened, I was doing the same thing. I was like, I had so much time on my hands, and I was like, where can I put my energy? And the internet is so vast, it's so overwhelming to be on the internet and trying to look for where you can plug in. And then I was at this talk, the Zoom talk, and someone was like, really just one, follow the organizers, and two, start like very local. And I thought that was an amazing, that was such great advice for me at the time, because really I did all the work on my block, you know, on Eastern Parkway in Brooklyn. And that was not easy. Like these things didn't happen overnight, because I don't know where everyone is located, but in a space like Brooklyn, it's such a tricky thing to navigate. There's the part of the book where I just talk about how Brooklyn is, I'm not going to say segregated, but it's organized into different classes and races, you know. So the Black and brown communities have a split from the gentrification community, which is white. And so there's a lot of friction, even in just attempting to say, hey, I'm your neighbor, let's do this. But we did find that it took time, like a whole year, I think, to build that trust and to say, you know, it doesn't have to be very radical. A lot of these people were just doing like emotional support or something, or delivering food or groceries. But I just think the hyper local is so important. Like even like your local library, and how like libraries is such a cultural space where these things happen and where education happens, or just like your local public school. I think it doesn't have to be so big for you to make these impacts in your community. So I would just go small. Yeah. The editor says small is all. And she's like, small is all. And it kind of fractals out into bigger things. And so,
yeah. Thank you.
That was a great question, Kathy. Thank you. Matthew, go for it.
Yeah, great. Thank you for reading the book. I really like the different colors in the sections. That's really nice too. When you're reading from the book, I was really reflecting on my own experiences, because I had a unique perspective of having a global team, and I remember the different stages of the pandemic where different communities were going through their own issues and problems. South Africa was a really one that stood out, and also India. India, when the pandemic really flared up, had a huge drive for sending medical equipment and things like that. And then I was also brought back to the fact that New York was hit very hard as well. And I'm just wanted to think about your reflections about how, from the lens of you were in Brooklyn, but how do you think that compares to other parts of the world and other communities globally?
That's a good question, and I think that's such a difficult one. I mean, the reason why I wanted to talk to two groups, Boston and Brooklyn, was because I wanted to understand how different the contexts were, and because of that, how different the responses were. And so it wasn't saying that one community was worse off than the other, or it wasn't saying that one tactic was better than the other, but rather like, how is this tactic that they're doing super specific to this group? I'm not really answering your question, because I don't think I can answer that unless I can be a part of the community. I think that was very important to write this book. I wasn't writing this. I started this from the academy, actually, from MIT, but I didn't finish it until I was like with them. And so it's important for me to say that, like, I'm not understanding these issues from text or like the internet. I'm understanding them from moving food and understanding like what's happening on the ground, and then seeing how that reflects on bigger things. So I can't answer your question, because I think it involves the voices from those communities to say what's happening. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but I don't know. Yeah.
But I think that what comes up is the fact that every community somehow decides what's important for that particular population. And we saw that in the pandemic. Everybody had the same thing happening, but in India, they all had to get medical equipment as fast as possible. In other places, it was like, let's go and make sure all the certain age population is looked after.
Mhm.
And I think that that's what I got from what you were reading about how the communities really decide very themselves what they need to focus on, their priority. And that's something to really, grab onto and understand. That's the value of the community. They're not doing the same thing. They're doing what they've decided is important for them. And that's very important.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I think it's also important to note that one of the terms that the organizers were using for like the tactics was called moments of the whirlwind, where it's like during COVID, there were just these ebbs and flows of energy, of people really burning out, and then people being like, oh, I want to volunteer again, and then people burning out. And so there were all these like waves of tactics and things being done, and then it stops again. So time is also an issue of like, things change as the COVID crisis changes, and these groups are still doing what they're doing now, but they're doing something different. And so that's a really good point.
So let's bring it back to what Eric was saying too, right? If we consider a prisoner community, they're a community because they suddenly decide that they're going to do what's important to them. But then you could also have a community of Buddhist monks in Tibet that also are going to decide what's really important to them. So I think a big aspect of community is about the collective decision making about what are we going to do to make sure that we're happy, safe, and successful.
Right. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. So actually, yeah, what the answer you gave was very genuine. I thought very sincere, genuine, and truthful to what it is, how it is. How can we decide what's good for another neighborhood, right? Or what's good for another? So this is why or the organization of the administration, government, and agencies and administration, local representatives, right? To hear, supposedly they're supposed to hear from everybody, right, what they need, and so it can inform choices and bills and laws and all that, which that this also brings to me the importance of being involved. It's so easy to blame the government, right? The government, the corporations, the oil, the money, the economy. It's so easy and be hands off. When it counts, we don't have time, we don't want to participate, we don't want to share our voice. We hope somebody will make the right choice. And when they don't, or choose for some other community, which wasn't for our community, then we become, critical. That's all we could do. And I think this is such a responsibility for our own well-being and faith, that we can be involved in something that impacts us, right? And there is unlimited topics and themes and areas that we need to be. Like right now, California is facing shortage of water. Southern California is becoming desertified. It's very, very serious situation right now, right? And still people don't think that, there is still water coming through the pipes, right? We haven't seen droughts, like there is no water. If you turn your faucet on and there is no water coming in, or the water pressure is low, you know what I mean? So being part of the community, I think, is not just for our pleasure, for the benefit for us, and it has to have all these good qualities and proper qualities for us to be a part of it. But also, what about our responsibility to our own kind, to the planet, to our beings, to the way things work around us, our responsibility for that. So to the question of Kathy, when she says, how do you pick, where do you find them? You can even organize a 3-people community where you have the same ideas and same aspirations, and work on something, or join a group that is, that has no name, but they're really working on something, and so this is really my takeaway from your very beautiful, very meaningful, very deep research and topic about, keep it small, keep it simple, keep it direct, keep it valuable, keep it meaningful, keep it real. Let care be about reality, authenticity, and what's present right now with all of us. And with the planet, please do not forget the planet. This is our home. This is where we all live. It's not just my home or your home. So maybe we're about 7 minutes over the hour. We understand people have to go to work, but if you're still, Mark, do you have any more time to stay? Another 10, 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes? Okay,
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's continue our conversation. Pamela, what do you think about all of this? It's been nice to see you. So it's such a good long time. You've been on a road trip, huh?
Lots of road trips, yes, and in community. So, I love this topic. I love where people can whether they're taking the initiative to step in and be involved or are looking. I think really importantly, it's whatever pod or community is to have a, with lack of better terms, a vision statement or a purpose that really describes the core reason why they gather. So you can attract those that have the same message, and you can push away those that don't, so that those that are together are in harmony, and it sets that environment in stage to do really good work. And I think that it's so important to be able to bring whatever aspects of qualities that we can contribute. Mark, I love the fact that you not only did this, but produced almost a manual of what these rich gatherings can do and how it was done, so that people can replicate it. Because just like this connection hour that is so valuable and could go to so much more, and Matthew coming in saying, how can we make this even bigger and better? It's so valuable. And getting those messages out there, we only know if somebody has blueprints. And so, yeah, thank you for your contributions, Mark. I think that was great that you took the time and your gifts and resources of time that you had at that point to be able to help guide others, because the ripple effect is certainly going to be there. You just may not be able to see it all. So thank you for you.
Thank you, Pamela. Also, hold on, honey. Also, before everybody goes, I just also want to put out there that if anybody has an idea or a, related topic that you'd like to begin a community under Connection Hour, yeah, get in touch with us and we can put the word out there and see who wants to join. Even if just a few small group can join, that would be fantastic. So yeah, keep in touch with us. Honey, did you have something you wanted to say? You're muted.
Yeah, I'm good. Yes, I was very happy to be here. It has been busy, and it's
Yes.
to see familiar
I
faces
want to
again.
say thank you to my daughter, Dr. Manijeh Motaghy, and my wonderful grandson for all this information I didn't know. Now I know so much information about all this, and I'm so glad, and I appreciate what you guys do and being here to give us information. Thank you so much. I love you. Love you both. I love you all.
Love you, honey.
Love you too.
She's our groupie. I love you.
And I'm driving and doing things.
Yes. Such a love, so much love. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's hear from maybe Sharif. So by the way, as far as like working with organizations, Sharif has been working with us in very important ways. Matthew, Andrew, who had to step off. We've all behind the scene been working on different projects that are of service, of service to the world community. Sharif, did you want to say anything about the community? I know you're involved with some.
I mean, nothing in particular. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing. That was all great. I did have like kind of a basic question. Just sort of the mutual aid aspect. Is that just the name of the organization, or is mutual aid sort of the new style of aid that you're sort of writing a blueprint for that is different from regular aid? And if it is that second thing, then how is mutual aid different from regular aid? Unless it's the name of the organization and I'm sort of confusing it, and it's otherwise just like regular aid type of deal. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, I should have been more explicit about that. So mutual aid is it's the name of the group, but it's also the kind of aid that they're talking about. So it's very specific. They're making a claim to a political history of what mutual aid is. It's not just like, so one of the phrases, it's like, it's just not charity, solidarity, not charity. So it's like, there's a very long history of mutual aid that it's hard to sum up, but it's basically what all marginalized communities have done. And it's pretty much just marginalized communities acting in solidarity with one another. The most famous mutual aid project was the Black Panthers free breakfast program. The Black Panthers, you know, they're in Oakland, they're in Chicago, they're in a few places, and they realize that their community doesn't have food in the morning for their children. And so they did this initiative of saying, we're going to give free breakfast to everyone. If you want free breakfast, you can come have it. And they're, again, to go back to the political reasons for why they're calling themselves mutual aid, there's a mutuality to it. And with that, there's also a project of understanding, like, why don't I have my needs met? Was a simple question that they were asking. Why don't our children have breakfast in the morning? So they did this program, and actually the government ended up taking over it in a very violent way. But now kids today have free breakfast in the morning. It's part of, like, it's a national project that the state took over because the Black Panthers were starting to get a lot of, like, support from everyone, from people, but that's like a whole other conversation. So I'm glad you brought it up, because these groups are very political. They want to ask why can't I get groceries in my neighborhood that's just, you know, why do I have to go to the bodega? And a lot of them live in, like, food deserts, which is basically, like, they don't have, within, like, a mile or two, they don't have, like, a fresh produce section. And so they're asking very difficult questions. They're not just doing it out of goodwill, which is also part of it, but they're doing it as a way of, like, imagining a different reality and sort of pushing. It's very hard. It's like some of the neighbors describe it as just like neighbors helping neighbors. Some of them do have a tracing of, like, anarchist thinking. A lot of them are socialists, saying we should have these needs met by the state. I don't want to do the volunteer work to do these things. Like, so it's a very messy question, but I think a lot of them are asking, how do I meet my needs, but also how do I change it so I don't have to do this forever, you know? So it's very political.
So would you say, like, maybe part of what separates mutual aid from maybe traditional aid or philanthropy or whatever is sort of mutual aid is coming from like internal to the community that needs the aid versus maybe a lot of times it's like people external who aren't a part of that community saying, oh, this is what you need, which coincidentally also, you know, feeds my checkbook or whatever. Maybe that would be kind of the internal external where the source of the aid is coming from.
Yeah, and I think Brooklyn was a really good example of what you're saying. So, like, there's a split between the north and south side of Crown Heights, where the north side is gentrified and predominantly white, and the south is predominantly Black historic neighborhood. And at the beginning of the pandemic, people were just sending money down, and which is amazing. Like, I'm not going to knock that. That's beautiful. But they were questioning, like, is this mutual? Is this a mutual relationship, or am I just a charity bucket or like, are we building something, or am I just giving you money, which is also fine, but do we want to do something more with that? Do we want to make something different? And so an example of how it became mutual was the food pod. So people started to say, okay, I'm going to meet my food needs with you. I'm going to put in money with my neighbor, and we're both going to get together to meet our needs. And it's very radical, because, like, if you, I mean, you can find food elsewhere, but if you stop doing that, you also stop eating, of course. Yeah. So you're kind of eating out, you're eating your network, basically. It's like that's mutual, like, where you're both involved in this thing and you're meeting your needs, versus here's $20 to get some chicken or something. And so that's sort of like the question they were constantly asking, like, is this mutual? How can this be mutual across race, gender, class, age? And how do we do that? One way they did that was food. So if that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that question, Sharif. It opened it up. Wow. So Mark, you are involved now with other projects at MIT that I loved. You told me a little bit about the oh, I don't want to take it away, but have you talk about how the indigenous people that you were researching or looking at, how they look at garbage and trash? Tell us a little bit about that.
That was such an anecdotal thing. Yeah, I can talk about. I mean, I'm doing a residency right now in Mexico City. That's about technology, pretty much. But this is in line with what we're talking about. The purpose of the residency is to say there is no universal technology. There's no one kind of technology. Like, and a technology is not just like an apparatus thing like this. Technology is also like the way we do things and the way we craft and the way we share. That it's not just like the soft and hard technology. These things work in other parts of the world so differently. And so we were talking to a community in Milpa Alta in Mexico City, a very historic part of the city where it's kind of maintained its identity throughout 3,000 years. And we were meeting with the people who speak Nahuatl, which is the language that was spoken in Mexico City before the Spaniards came and forced people to speak Spanish. And one of the ways that, just language affects how you see technology and how you see the world, it's just like the words we use to describe these things. So they were saying like, there's no word for trash here. That word didn't exist 3,000 years ago, and there's no word for rubbish because everything is kind of in process, right? Everything kind of moves into something else and becomes the next thing, versus now it becomes somewhere in a landfill. And so that was beautiful. And there are other things like there's no word for to be because again, everything is kind of changing and in process. And so we're just learning about how the language that they use and the technologies that they have are very specific to them and have their own worldview for how we interact with each other and how we relate to each other. But that's separate. I mean, I hope that's interesting. Yeah, just like, that's what I'm doing now, what I'm working on now.
Yeah, and so it's not separate though, I think, because communities need language, right, to communicate with each other, and whatever language we choose, it's all fabricated anyways. These are concepts we construct, and we fall into the trap of thinking they're the truth, the absolute truth. And so having no vocabulary for trash is actually pretty useful, And so within communities, we can look at what are our concepts, what is the language we're using, what words do we use, what do they mean? Like you were emphasizing the word care, that care has changed its meaning. It needs to become, attractive or new age or some other way that people are not even connecting to the heart of it, to the core of it. So language and communities are one, I think, that we need them, and systems. Yeah, that's great. So, wow, so there is so much more to learn from you, Mark, and your book. Please go ahead, everybody, and order that book to support the idea, the process, the interviews, all the good work that Mark has put into this, and learn from it, and also spread the word. Let me put that link here again. There's so much we could learn as human beings, right? That is just continual, never stops. Anything else you want to say, Matthew, to wrap this up, or anybody else?
Yeah, there is actually. I was reading an article today about the Great Resignation, where people are still leaving their jobs, even though the pandemic's kind of over. And I think that fact that people are still leaving their jobs goes back to what we're kind of talking. It's a reboot of our values and what we really hold dear, and it goes back to the community. So I think that that Mark was talking a lot about what happened in the pandemic, but I think it still plays forward, right? And I think that this is very, very important point to say that let's not lose sight of this. Let's keep going, and it's an opportunity for us to continue to build community. And that's why I'm very passionate about what we're doing in Connection Hour, Manijeh. You know, this work, and we need to keep on going with this. And I think that's what I wanted to close on. And what do you think, Mark? You mean, you did this in the pandemic, but this is super relevant now, and we need to keep on playing it forward, yes?
Yeah, and I think I think crisis happens at different times and places. There's just not one crisis happening. If we look at communities like in Brooklyn, a crisis was happening before the pandemic, and the crisis of the COVID-19 only opened up issues that were already there that we weren't really looking at. And so that's totally spot on. And that crisis continues and changes. And yeah, and maybe I'll say one more thing. I really liked Kathleen's question. I think, you know, I'm not a full-time organizer. I'm an artist, you know, I make videos. I'm a storyteller, and it's very important to me to tell a story of how these communities actually do fight back. One of my mentors gave me the text. There's a really amazing text that I really encourage looking after. It's Ursula Le Guin's Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. And she just makes this, not discovery, but she says, like, the first tool was not a spear, it was a basket. And that changes so many things, because it, like, the very first protagonist in a story, like the savior, wasn't like this manly spear throwing person, but it was actually gatherers, like, working collectively. And so it was very important for me to tell a story of, like, it's very heroic, but there are no heroes in this story. There's no like Marvel heroes saving the world, saving Brooklyn. It's these very ordinary people doing very ordinary things. And so that was one of my aspirations. It's ordinary people, yeah, at the public library and sharing and being active in your public schools. And so that was my aspiration. I hope it carries through. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. You've said so much good stuff. I wonder if you have like 2 or 3 advice for this community. 3 things you would say for us to watch out for, to do, to continue with.
Whoa.
No pressure.
I mean, I'm still learning what you are all interested in, which is really cool. And I think, like you said, having the space to bring forward something you want to work on is, I think, really awesome. Because I think you never know what experiment's gonna catch on. So I encourage people to, what do you want to work on? Maybe share it with others. Maybe it'll turn into something else when you have a dialogue. And I don't know. I think what's so hard, I think, with communities is being vulnerable, which is very hard over Zoom, but when you're on the ground, it's you don't really know what people's needs are until you become vulnerable, which is a very hard thing to do. It's not something we're like conditioned to do. I think that that really changed a lot with the communities that I worked in. Like, and it took trust. It took meeting after a while to say like, oh, actually, I need this, or I care about this. And so I would say, I don't have any formula for vulnerability or like sharing that, but I hope you keep meeting, and I'm excited to see what you work on. Yeah, and hopefully I'll return again. I would like to keep meeting with you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. So have this space to bring forward what people want to work on, to offer the space, to being vulnerable for the members could reveal what the need is, right? And then keep meeting. Those are the three things I got from you now. Yeah. Well, it's been amazing, really amazing. I know Hani would like to say something. Maybe Randy. Randy, did you want to say something? You're unmuted.
I loved the phrase that a friend of Mark's gave him. It was small something.
Small is all.
Small is all. I'm going to write that down. Thank you. That was beautiful. And thank you, Mark, so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Go ahead, Hani. Yeah.
Thank you and Mark. I'm so proud of you guys, and I got so much from it, and I loved it. And I want to say excuse me because I was moving too much, because I had to do the things that I had to do, and I did it. I had to get gas, go out shopping, this and this. So I want to please excuse me for that, moving too much. Love you and see you again, I hope.
Yes, definitely, Mark. You have to be with us again and talk about your progress with things, with communities, with projects. And definitely, I'd love for you to, I'm going to introduce you and Matthew to the Stanford project, Planet Positive project. You both have a lot to contribute, to say, and to help the world and all of us in whatever way we can be a part of this. Yeah. And thank you, everybody for coming. There are a lot of people who didn't make it. A lot of people from other parts of the globe didn't make it. But in September, I'm going to visit Amsterdam, Hague, for a 2-day Planet Positive conference with Stanford that is meeting in Hague. And so I'll be meeting a lot of people there that I've been collaborating with, talking with. They've become my colleagues. I hope to meet Matthew there in person. And so I'll be bringing back fresh perspectives or knowledge, but also I want to encourage everybody to really tune in to the news and to reports and to updates about the planet without freaking out, without, keeping our equanimity and being realistic and contributing in any small way. Small is all. Any small way. Yes, thank you. So please unmute yourself and say goodbye in any way you'd like to. And
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Manijeh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you for being here. And
Thanks,
Laura,
everyone.
thank you for being there. I know you're at the office or tied up or something, but yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. I love you guys.
Bye, bye.
Love you, Marky June. Love
Love
you
you.
so much. Wherever you are,
Love
June.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank you.
Kathy. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks, Bonnie, for coming in. Yeah.